Hey everyone, welcome to the recording of the Meet the Incoming RD West session. If you were not able to attend the session live, this is for you to review, get to know me as a person, what type of RD I hope to be, and different ways that you can get involved in the region. So we'll go over some information about me personally, what I want to do as RD and how I wish to interact with the membership, some moving forward vision, some goals, a timeline of the first 6 months of my term, and then ways to get involved. So this is also doubling as an overview for the regional leadership team so that you have an idea of what to expect if you're interested in running for a position or interested in nominating someone you think would be a great fit. Other opportunities and also opportunities on the national board. We still have some positions open that are great opportunities for anyone who's ready to step into some leadership. And then feedback from you. So about me. So don't mind the aesthetic. I don't know why I went with a kind of burnt spy file template, but I guess that's what I thought was appropriate, especially with the picture I chose. So I chose this picture because I think it was when I was truly authentically myself. I was probably 3 or 4. I was very much a weird kid, kept to myself, was always very introverted. And this was right before I started realizing that, oh, maybe people don't respond well to how I respond to things. And so I started to adapt based on what I thought was acceptable. But I try to be this version of myself more and more every day, especially as I get older. So this picture is actually the background on my desktop, on my laptop, so that I look at it every day and I'm like, okay, I need to get back to this version of Ruthie who didn't really pay much attention to what people thought about her. And all my pictures from this age are kind of like this. I did not like taking pictures for most of you who know me. I actually don't like taking pictures now. So more and more, I'm reverting back to this version of myself, but with some adult qualities and um, things that maybe a 4-year-old wouldn't do. But the still, my temperament and all of that is returning to my original, which I am very proud of. So my full name is Ruth Ashley Shaw. I prefer Ruthie. I use she, her, hers pronouns. My date of birth is November 15, 1990. So that makes me a Scorpio and 30 years old. I'll be 31 in a couple of months. Crazy how time flies. I was born in Brooklyn, New York. So I haven't lived in New York for a while, but I still have a bit of an accent. So if you hear a word and it sounds kind of funny, that's where it came from. My butterfly birth was via the new chapter at the University of Pittsburgh, spring 2009. My line name is True Soldier, and yes, it is all capitalized. My line number is number 4. So shout out to the Quad Squad. I come from a line of 7, and I went to school at Pitt for college and Carnegie Mellon University for undergrad. So I spent a lot of time in Pittsburgh before moving here to Denver, which is now my home, and I am very happy here. And what I do. So I try not to say my profession anymore when someone asks me, what do I do? So I tried to do that here as well. I do screenwriting. I have recently got back into art and design. So for those of you who don't know, I wanted to be an architect. I went to college to do architecture. And instead of going to graduate school for architecture, I changed my path. But I've really gotten back into art and design and getting in touch with my creative side recently. And then finally, consulting, which is my actual profession, data and analytics consulting. But I always say that one last because I am making a very conscious decision to not be defined by my job. And then a little bit more about me. I'm really into puzzles. I love jigsaw puzzles. I really have gotten into wooden jigsaw puzzles. I love brain teasers, any type of puzzle. That's really usually what I'm doing in my spare time. I also travel a lot, or pre-COVID. I do a lot of solo travel. It's a very important part of my life. And It's the closest thing to a spiritual experience that I have when I am traveling by myself. I'm really into data, and I've been trying to bring that into Theta Nu Xi, and it has been embraced, which I really appreciate. So I hope to bring more information to our members in the region and nationally on how we can move forward being more data driven. I'm also extremely introverted, maybe hermit status. Special shout out to all the sisters who still love me and know that if they don't hear from me or they don't see me for a while, it's not because I don't love them, but I do need a significant amount of time on my own to really be content and feel like I'm not being overwhelmed. And I have a very dark sense of humor, so apologies in advance. Sometimes it can feel very Wednesday Adam-esque. Um, and then finally, I am a digital minimalist mostly. So I am not on social media. I don't have email on my phone. I only check email on my iPad or my computer, and I only check it certain times during the day. I try to limit any type of screen time, which is very important, especially since professionally and a lot of things that I do are in front of a screen. So when I don't have to be in front of a screen, it's really important for me. And the reason why I want to bring this up is because I will bring that into my role as RD. So I won't be on social media as RD. I also really struggle with group text. So I haven't been on GroupMe for quite a number of years. I'm easing back into it. We use it for leadership, but I might not be as in tuned. I've dealt with depression and anxiety, and digital things and social media and all that have been a huge part of that. So I have been supported. I've been on the RLT for 2 years, and it hasn't been an issue. There are wonderful sisters who will send me a message that was in GroupMe or on social media that they think I should know about. So I'm sure we can work it out. There are many other ways that I hope to engage with the leadership. I mean, not the leadership, the membership and the leadership, but um, just know that it'll not be through things like social media. But not to worry, I am accessible in other ways. So how do I plan to interact as regional director? I hope to have office hours at least twice a month. So basically a time where I set aside to do work related to the region, and you can drop in, ask any questions, hang out with me, do your own work, whatever the case is. Town halls quarterly. So updates on what has gone on during the previous 3 months, what some plans are for the next 3 months. I'm very big into planning. I don't stick to my plan if it doesn't work. And I'm always open to feedback. So as many opportunities that I can create for us to collaborate on how to best serve the region. Working sessions. So I want to try to have an opportunity for us to get together and work out things um, as a group. So this can be if there's a particular issue that we need to solve or challenge that we need to think about. I would send out a call for a working session. So if, for example, a chapter asks for help for their recruitment, we'll send out a call if anyone's available between 12 and 2 on this Sunday to just join and help brainstorm. So creating those opportunities for us to collaborate together. Surveys. So I'm really big into feedback data. And these wouldn't be necessarily long surveys. So currently we do have a survey that we give right after we have an event for a regional event. And it's like 5 questions. It takes less than 5 minutes to fill out. And it makes all the difference in the world when we can see where we can improve. We can get an idea of what you really like so that we can repeat it. And so any kind of micro surveys that we can create so that we have a pretty decent feedback loop for continuous improvement. That's really important to me. Email is my prime way of communicating. I'm pretty responsive to email, And it's the best way to get in touch with me. And then, of course, sisterhood events. So our outgoing RD, Ashley, did amazing trivia nights. It was always very fun. So if we can figure out what would work for us to interact outside of business or other types of interactions, where we can just get together and have a good time and get to know each other. And also, what I do want to add about just my working style and how I communicate. So I ask a lot of questions. I do a lot of thinking before action. I'm very iterative. So I try to make incremental changes instead of big changes. I'm really into prioritizing tasks. And so I can be very, not rigid, but procedural. And I think that helps me just personally keep everything on track. But I do think it also helps from an organization standpoint where we go in with a plan. But that doesn't mean I'm not open to suggestions. This is just how I am, and I will be coming into the role. But I always want to hear if there are any ways that we can work better. And then also, I try to minimize ad hoc communication. So meaning moments communication where something comes up and then we need to send a quick text or a quick email or back and forth emails. So I try to make sure that if everything is clear in the beginning, it makes it that more efficient. So we don't need 5 back and forth emails if we just make sure to talk about it in the last meeting we had. And that doesn't mean that things won't come up, but just to give you an idea of how I approach working with teams and communication to make sure that no one's overburdened by a ton of emails and different communication streams. So I will do my best to also do that as regional director. All right, so moving forward. So this is titled Vision. Maybe this is more of kind of my opinion or my outlook on some of the key topics that we have been working towards in the region. And of course, this is very dependent on chapters or members and what is appropriate at the time that we tackle some of these things. But just a quick overview. So recruitment and intake. I've received a lot of feedback as I've talked to sisters in the region that it's an opportunity to distinguish recruitment from intake. Sometimes these words are used interchangeably and they're not the same thing. So if we can get a better process around recruitment, especially, that could lift quite a burden off of chapters who might not be able to be as successful in recruitment and therefore have small lines. And it's just a repeated cycle. Emphasizing life in TNX beyond college and Greek life. So I think this is really important, especially for undergrad chapters, to make it clear that when you're joining this organization, you are joining and you automatically have role models, you have mentors. There are members who have written letter of recommendations for grad schools. There are members who have gone into business together. There's been a ton of knowledge sharing when it comes to skills and important factors that contribute to other parts of our lives. So there's so much to offer outside of the college life. So while it's fun and it's great to wear your letters and on campus and have that presence, it's so much more. And I think if there's a way that we can emphasize that, that would help a lot when it comes to recruitment. Undergrad sustainability. So partnership with University Greek Life. What I've gathered is that some universities just don't know how to work with multicultural Greek organizations. And, if there's a way that we can help them help us, and I know there's a fine line between working with people who just need a little bit of guidance versus trying to get attention from an administration at a university that doesn't really want to help us. But I think there just needs to be a little push and some open communication. I think it's important to never underestimate likability and clear communication. So oftentimes these officials rarely hear from the regional director of an organization or someone who's on the national board. And so just reaching out already puts us above others in their mind as an organization that's serious and really wants our chapters to be successful. But I want to repeat what works. So there have been a lot of events in the past, a lot of great ideas that have floated. How can we repeat the things that have been successful? So, for example, Psi has had great success with virtual events. Once we got into the pandemic, they thought of some great virtual ideas like a syllabus review, and simple things that don't take a lot of heavy lifting, but were really useful. And then an ecosystem of modular resources. And this kind of goes hand in hand with the borrow and repeat. So how can we have a repository of events that other chapters have given that other chapters can probably borrow? Maybe some graphic templates for events that chapters just can add their name and location to if it's something that they want to do for themselves. All of our undergrad chapters have less than 5 members. I think most of them have 2 members. And they have school, they have their personal lives, they have their mental and physical health. How can we make it easier for them? And this, I think, is a great start to have things that they can just pick up and modify however they need to make it appropriate for where they are, but where the heavy lifting has already been done and it's already been proven successful. And then member engagement. So I think the West has done a really good job of this the last couple of years. We really reevaluated what it means to be inclusive across membership statuses and backgrounds. And so we were able to provide some more support for other life goals. And I think we've also done pretty well with this on a national level, talking about topics related to parenting, career, how to, be successful in other endeavors in your life. And how can we continue that so that Theta Nu Xi is something that you love and that you pledge to be a part of, but also it helps you achieve other parts of your life, other goals in other parts of your life, and offering various levels of engagement. So members do want to be engaged, but oftentimes it comes down to level of commitment. So how can we have opportunities for involvement that aren't a committee that meets every 2 weeks for the next year? Can they just hop into, for example, a working session? Like maybe we are working on something and we put out a call and they have experience in a particular area and they have time on that Saturday that we said we were going to have a working session. So how can we continue to diversify on various ways to engage our membership, regardless of their membership status and their level? And finally, regional sustainability. Again, another lesson that I think we learned during the pandemic. So consistent engagement across all membership statuses and reducing boundaries between chapters and locations. With the region-wide intake team and how we did regional conference this year, it really didn't matter where you were living, where you were coming from. You were able to participate if you wanted to. You were able to get your swag bag for conference sent to you. And this really showed that we have a much wider reach if we try to make it region-wide versus location or chapter related. So how can we continue that where we're thinking from a regional level, and how can we be as inclusive as possible without worrying about the boundaries between chapters and locations? And so goals. So this first goal kind of sets the stage for the rest of them. But for the first 5 or 6 months of my term, I want to do a very detailed current state assessment. So a chapter assessment, this includes everything from what are your pain points, what do you think you're doing well, all the way down to when do you have chapter? If we know when everyone has chapter, we can organize delegate sessions so that everyone has time to get to a chapter and discuss with the rest of their chapter before they vote. What tools do you use? Do you use Google Drive, Dropbox, GroupMe, Slack? And some of these things we might not use right away, but having that information can help us make decisions further down the line. Overall membership assessment. So not just what's going on with the chapter, but what are members feeling? What are their concerns? What are their ideas for how we can improve membership engagement and regional operations? And then finally, a school assessment. So what do the campuses look like where we have chapters? How many Greek organizations are on their campuses? How is recruitment done across the campus? So whatever we can learn from the environments that our chapters are in will help us more and more in the future. Sustainability practices. So focusing on small processes to implement and repeat. Change doesn't have to be big. You can do one small thing each month, and then after 12 months, you would have made a great impact. So how can we do small changes that are impactful without it being too much of a burden with upfront work? Pilot programs. So I am a big fan of trying out things before you fully implement them. And this is when I think the current state assessment will really come in handy, because it will help us determine some priorities and what could be good pilot program candidates. So this is something that would start hopefully sometime mid next year if we determine that there are certain pilot programs that are worth exploring. Document growth opportunities. So by growth, I don't mean expansion. I mean growth as far as how we can improve the region and opportunities to expand on our community outreach. There are many different possibilities, but starting a running list to pull from when we have capacity. So if we are constantly adding different growth opportunities, once we see them, we don't have to tackle them in that moment, but to know that there are areas of improvement. We already have something where if we have some downtime, or if we have a month where we want to focus on something new, we can pull it from this list. And then regional ecosystem. So I talked about this a little bit in the last slide, but anything that we can have that's basically a repository for chapters to pull from, whether that's outlines for events, graphic templates for advertising, anything that is already existing, that has been successful, that we think would work across the region. How can we just have it in one place? And this could be the first place that chapters go when they're about to plan a recruitment week. Let's see what other chapters have done that we can reuse, so that if there's one event that is very specific to us, we can focus on that. But the other events during the week are something that we can do that has been done before. And this is a very basic timeline, but just to give you an idea of what I'm thinking for the first 6 months. And I like working in 6-month increments or quarterly increments, and I hope to have updates where we can go over what happened in the last 6 months, what was accomplished based on the plan that was laid out, what the next 6 months will look like. So hopefully this is the first of a number of 6-month planned increments that I can share with everyone. But for August, RLT nominations. So we are in the middle of RLT nominations. Today is August 20th. So we have a few more days to nominate members to the regional leadership team. For September, we will be voting on the budget. We'll have RLT elections and transitions. Hopefully we will have a RLT planning retreat. And the reason why this is important for the membership to know is hopefully my goal is to have it open to membership. So possibly have time slots for chapters and members to kind of drop in, give their ideas, give their input, so that it's as collaborative as possible. And finally, I start classes on the 27th. So I am about to be a student again. I am attending a screenwriting professional program at UCLA. Luckily, it is online, and it'll be 1 or 2 nights a week. But the reason why I added it is because um, I will be doing a lot of foundational and upfront lifting before this date. And as you can see in October, I go back to work in October. So before mid-October, you will probably hear from me more. I will probably be reaching out to get more information. And it might feel like I'm in high gear, but I just will be trying to utilize as much time as possible before my days get taken back up by work, and then evenings by school. So after mid-October, whatever my pace or cadence is, that will be the actual normal pace of how I work. But you will probably hear from me a lot more before then. And in October, I do hope to have a first town hall and RLT meet and greet so that we can get everyone introduced and you know who to reach out to for particular input or help that you need. And so the current state assessment I have right now from September to February, like I said, I plan to be quite exhaustive. They'll still include talking to not only chapters, but their chapter advisors, their faculty advisors, their university Greek life, and then members, regardless of membership status. If you're GAP at large, if you're not paying dues at this time, you're still a member, I still want to hear from you, and GAP chapters as well. So this will take some time. Hopefully in February, we can have a session where we go over the findings. And then finally, regional conference will be happening Martin Luther King Jr. weekend. So it was planned to be in Albuquerque because this past year was supposed to be at Albuquerque, but of course, COVID is unfortunately dictating how we live our lives. What we're planning to do is a virtual conference with some type of in-person element. So whether that's a hybrid or we have virtual programming, but we get down to Albuquerque within a few months of regional conference. So the RLT is meeting next week, so the week of the 23rd, to finalize the decision. But we want to make sure everyone's safe. But at the same time, we do want to get down to Albuquerque to support the side chapter, which was a very big goal of having regional conference in Albuquerque. So we will let you know what that outcome is, but that's what we're thinking so far. And this is pretty bare bones as a timeline, but keep in mind that all other regional operations will continue. So supporting recruitment, supporting programming, anything else going on with chapters, in addition to some of this work that I hope to accomplish in the first 6 months. All right, let's go over ways to get involved. So RLT overview. So I'll go over each position, role descriptions, and some things to consider for this year. First up is Regional Officer of Intake and Expansion. So technically these can be 2 roles, one for undergrad and one for GAP. In the past, we've usually only had 1 role, but if this is something you're interested in, or you think someone would be good at this role for either GAP or undergrad, you can nominate them or nominate yourself for either or. If there aren't nominations for each undergrad and GAP, we would contact those who are nominated to ask if they're okay running as the overall position. So this role oversees intake and expansion for the region, provides training, deals with any reports or documents related to intake, and making sure everyone is following all the guidelines. Some considerations for this year. So we are doing region-wide intake again, but it will probably be a hybrid because universities are going back to school in person. So an in-person virtual intake. Another thing to consider is you have a supportive but inexperienced RD. So this is the area that I am the least experienced in. I have participated in intake once in my 12 and a half years as a sister, and it was in 2010. And I am pretty sure most of the things I know are not relevant anymore. I have started to review the most recent NIM, and I will support you in any way possible, but there are certain things that I might not know off the top of my head. So please be patient with me, and I will rely on you for what is appropriate when it comes to intake as I continue to learn more. And then finally, potential reactivation attempts of Arizona chapters. So Tau and Mu currently don't have any members on campus, and we've been talking about reactivating them for the last year or so now. Again, this is a potential. We don't want to stretch our resources too thin, but if we do have members who are ready to take this on, that might be something else that you should consider. Regional treasurer. So overseeing regional finances, creating our budget, assisting chapters with treasury functions. So Britta is our current regional treasurer, and they are running again. But how, this is still a democratic process. So if you do want to run for regional treasurer, by all means, but keep in mind that Britta's initiative will continue. So Britta initiated a conversation with our national treasurer to figure out how all chapters can use the same bank account. And so because of the halt on legislation this year, we've decided to try it out in the West. So this is kind of a pilot program. And hopefully if it works out, it can be spread across the region, spread across the national organization. But this will be the main initiative for at least the next year, maybe more, where we try to figure out how we can get all of our chapters using the same bank. So keep that in mind if you're interested in this position or if you want to assist with this initiative. Regional undergrad student advocate. So this is the only undergraduate on the RLT. They are the liaison between the RLT and undergrad members, and they provide the undergrad perspective. So this role was held by Claire from the side chapter. Amazing job. Claire also assisted with social media accounts. Of course, if you come into this role, you may not necessarily want to do that aspect, but it really added some dimension to our content to make sure that we were posting things that were important to undergrads as well. And some considerations for this year. And I think they're all good considerations. Because we had region-wide intake, the new members already are familiar with each other. I know, for example, when I crossed, I don't think I met anyone outside of my chapter until maybe 2 years after I had already crossed. So it's great that we already have a relationship across the region with the new members. Small chapter sizes, which we hope to increase, but this gives the opportunity that we can hear every voice. Versus if we had larger chapters and it's a representative from each chapter communicating with the USA, but you can get everyone's perspective. And it's really important to provide support outside of intake. Claire really stressed this during her tenure in this role, that oftentimes we think of the main activity of undergrads to be intake, but there are so many other things that are going on that we can support. And another thing to consider is, as a member of the RLT, you cannot participate in intake. So if that is something that is really important to you, keep that in mind. However, with the new undergrad advisory council, there is still some representation of undergrad sisters through that. So between the USA and the undergrad advisory council, we're trying to make sure that we hear our undergrad sisters' concerns and make sure that they are a part of the conversation. Regional Officer of Programming. So like Regional Officer of Intake and Expansion, these can be 2 roles. Right now, there are 2 separate people in these roles. I am still technically the Regional Officer of GAP Programming, and Lily is our Regional Officer of Undergrad Programming at this time. But again, if there is one person who runs for this role, or there's not enough interest to have 2 different people in the role, it can be a singular role. So this person develops relevant programming for undergrad and grad members, ensuring they follow policies and procedures, providing any support to chapters, planning region-wide initiatives, and their counterparts on the national board are the vice president of undergraduate affairs and the vice president of GAP affairs. And a few considerations for this year. So before COVID, we implemented, or legislation was passed to change chapter standards to chapter management programs. And we haven't had them enforced, I think, since they passed due to COVID. But now that hopefully we're getting things together, this will be a consideration for helping chapters transition to this new policy. Also, this role no longer includes co-chairing the regional conference committee. So if you were familiar with this role before 2020, the main part of this role was to chair the regional conference committee. And in 2020, we changed the regional bylaw, so that is no longer a responsibility of the programming chairs. The chair of the regional conference committee is someone outside of the RLT, which is really great. This frees up the officers to focus on regional programming. So I was in this role for 2 years. The first year I was the co-chair of the regional conference committee, and then the second year I wasn't, and it made all the difference. The second year I was able to have the capacity to plan monthly regional events and other things outside of conference. So if you remember this role from a little bit ago, and this might have been a hesitation, it is no longer a requirement. And then finally, for GAP, you also are a resource for GAP transitions and returning members. So if you are the regional officer of GAP programming, or if you are an overall regional officer of programming, this is a responsibility that will be included. So the West has increased its membership during the pandemic, which is amazing. We were able to connect with more sisters, especially since we switched to virtual. And so I had a lot more conversations about what it means to be GAP, what's the difference between GAP at large and being in a GAP chapter, updating members who maybe haven't been in the loop for over a decade, explaining Club Express, explaining all the different policy changes that happened in the last 10 or so years. So this also becomes part of your role. And so the role is regional officer of programming, but it more so feels like regional officer of GAP affairs in a way, especially when it comes to being that resource for sisters who are making that transition. Regional administrator. So the regional administrator takes minutes for all the meetings, a resource for Club Express, oversees regional communication efforts, maintains our records, and works with the vice president of membership affairs to execute strategy. So a consideration for this year, I mentioned this earlier, but given that I try to be a digital minimalist and I'm not on social media and I'm not on some of the communication channels that other members are on, I still understand how important it is and how convenient these lines of communications are for the membership. And I will try my best to kind of get in where I feel comfortable and where my anxiety is still in check. But because I am not going to be on some of these things, I really hope to work with the incoming regional administrator on making sure that I'm still aware of what's going on, and that all of our regional messaging is clear and concise. And this could be a good thing where there's only one person, the regional administrator, who communicates with the membership in this way. So there's no overlap about what I might communicate versus what they might communicate. But I really would appreciate the support and the understanding that this might be a little bit extra in the communication realm to kind of work with me on communication methods. So keep that in mind. And then before we move on, all of these positions are great positions. They're very useful positions. If there's anything that you see in the role description that you may not think that you're great at or you're worried about, still try it out. We can move different requirements and have other members of the RLT take on certain things. For example, Clara's USA really helped us out with our social media, even though that's also a regional administrator responsibility. So just because you feel like maybe you don't fully fit in with everything that was said, it doesn't mean that you can't add value. All right, other opportunities. So regional conference committee, regional intake team, assisting an RLT member. So let's say that you want to do intake, so you don't want to be on the RLT, or you're not ready for a full RLT position. You can still assist someone who is doing the position that you might be interested in a year or two. There are always ways to help out, and we always welcome volunteers when we're working on initiatives. Attend a working session. So like I said before, I want to try to make it easy for people to contribute, even if they don't have as much time. So instead of committing to a committee, if we're working on something that you think you could be helpful with, just join that particular working session. And then work on a task as a chapter. This could be as a chapter or a group of members who are not in a chapter. But let's say Xi Kappa wants to help out with building out our resource ecosystem. And they say, hey, we are going to spend 30 extra minutes after our chapter meeting to work on some things. Maybe they just sit and work on graphics for potential events, some templates that chapters can reuse in the future. So my main goal with thinking about different ways to be involved other than having RLT positions or being on a committee is I was thinking about accountability. So I feel like we talk about accountability a lot, and I want to kind of reduce the need to have that conversation. So if we have designated times where we can just sit together and work on it, after that meeting's done, then you're done with the work that you volunteered for. You don't have to worry about doing things on your own afterwards, follow-ups. There's so many things going on in our lives. People have jobs, they have children, they have pets, so it's very hard to have in my opinion, it's very hard to sometimes have the accountability conversation when there's just so much on people's plates. If your child is sick, you have to, maybe call your spouse, call the school, call the doctor, call into work so that you can stay home and take care of your kid. If you don't call me to let me know that you can't attend a meeting, after the fact, I'm not going to be upset about it. With everything going on, I would probably think I'm the last person that you would need to call. And I understand that. So any way where we can reduce that. And then secondly, another word I was thinking about is committee. So commit is in the word committee. And there are some things that committees themselves do that members may want to help with, but they can't commit to being on a committee. So if we have a committee for, I don't know, something around recruitment, and the committee meets periodically over the course of 6 months. If someone wants to help out, but they can't commit to the cadence of committee meetings, they should still be able to help out. So trying to break down those barriers to entry for those who do want to contribute, but have a lot more going on in their lives. And I'm open to any other suggestions on how we can further break down those boundaries so that everyone who wants to help can help in the way that they are able to. All right, finally, the national board. So currently we have 4 positions that are still open on the national board. It is my understanding that we will be reopening elections soon. So keep these in mind as well if you're ready to take that step to be on the national board. So we have the director of administration. I won't go too detailed into this. It's very similar to the regional administrator. We have director of communications. So they manage our social media accounts, chapter websites, and collab with the vice president of membership affairs on internal communication. National parliamentarian, which is a very important role. I remember when we didn't have a national parliamentarian, and having one just makes it all the much easier to do legislation and elections, which they oversee. and then regional director central. So there may be some of you who are watching this who are not from the West, or if you are if you are from the West, but you know someone who lives in the central region that you think would be a great RD, please encourage them to run. And then finally, I want feedback from you. So this slide was used during the live session, but it's okay to, I wanted to keep this in here so that instead you can pause this video right now and you can drop me an email if you have any questions, ideas, or comments. And then also for what's on the right, RLT nominations, conference committee, regional intake team, and then Tau and Mu reactivation team. So I am thinking about renaming this. I think it would be more appropriate to maybe call it Arizona Action Team or something like that. There'll probably be a lot more upfront work, a lot more evaluation on how we can be successful. So don't necessarily think of this as just intake focused or it resulting in a line in the next 12 months. If that happens, that would be great. But I'm thinking of this more as a brainstorming group initially. And then also don't worry about your location for now. So because we have done regional intake and will continue to do it in some capacity, any location that you're in, if you want to assist with working on the Arizona reactivation teams or these kind of brain trusts, I'm still obviously thinking of names to call it. Please reach out, and you can nominate yourself if that's a question. So if you're interested in any of the regional leadership team roles, you can send an email saying I nominate myself for XYZ role. And if you're interested in multiple of these things on the list, it could be in one email. So no need to send separate emails. I'll read through your full email and make note of the things that you are interested in. So thank you for watching this video. I want to end with a reminder on where we are when it comes to elections for the regional leadership team. You have until August 23rd to nominate yourself or other members. We had the regional leadership overview in this session, and we had it live earlier this week. You'll accept the nominations, candidates announced, bids due, all of that fun stuff. And then hopefully by mid to the end of September, we will have a fully transitioned regional leadership team for the 2021-2022 year. So again, thank you so much. Let me know if you have any questions, any comments, and I look forward to serving you as regional director.